The message came without warning on a cold morning in the year 2347. Every screen across the Galactic Confederation flickered and went dark before a face appeared. It was not a face that any species in the known galaxy had ever seen before. The creature had gray-scaled skin and four eyes that burned with a cold yellow light. When it spoke, the translation system struggled to keep up with the harsh clicking sounds of its language. Ambassador stood in the grand chamber of the Confederation Council on the space station Unity. He was surrounded by delegates from 40 different species. Some had fur and walked on four legs. Others floated in special tanks filled with liquid. A few were so strange that human eyes could barely understand what they were looking at. But they all shared one thing in that moment. They were all afraid. The creature on the screen called itself Supreme Commander of the Dominion. It spoke of an empire that stretched across 1,000 worlds beyond the edge of known space. It spoke of armies that numbered in the billions. It spoke of weapons that could crack planets in half and burn stars into darkness. And then it made its demand. Surrender everything. Every world, every station, every ship. The Confederation would become part of the Dominion. Its people would serve thee as workers and food. There would be no negotiation. There would be no mercy. The Confederation had 30 days to accept these terms. If they refused, they would take what they wanted anyway and leave nothing alive behind them. The screen went dark, and chaos erupted in the chamber. Had served as Earth's ambassador to the Confederation for 12 years. He had seen arguments and debates and heated disagreements between species that had nothing in common except their membership in the Great Alliance. But he had never seen anything like this. Delegates were screaming. Some were crying. A few had simply collapsed where they stood. The ambassador was making a high-pitched keening sound that the translation device said meant absolute despair. Commander Jake stood at the back of the chamber in his dress uniform. He was the captain of the Earth diplomatic vessel Relentless, and he had escorted Ambassador to this meeting as part of his regular duties. Now he watched the alien delegates fall apart and felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not fear exactly. Something else. Something that felt like recognition. He had studied history. All human officers did. He knew what happened when peaceful civilizations met aggressive ones. He knew what happened when species that had forgotten how to fight encountered species that had made war into an art form. Lieutenant Amy Vance appeared at his elbow. She was his communications officer, and she spoke 12 alien languages without needing a translator. Right now her face was pale, but her voice was steady when she spoke. She told him that the Confederation had no real military. 300 years of peace had made them soft. Their defense forces were ceremonial. Their weapons were antiques. If they attacked, there would be nothing to stop them. Nodded slowly. He had suspected as much. The Confederation was a beautiful dream of cooperation and peace between different species. But dreams did not stop invasion fleets. Dreams did not protect the innocent from monsters. Ambassador made his way through the panicking crowd toward them. His face was grim, but his eyes were sharp. He had been a soldier himself once, long before he became a diplomat. He knew what was thinking because he was thinking the same thing. The three of them stepped into a quiet corridor away from the chaos. Spoke first. He said that the Confederation could not defend itself. He said that if someone did not act, billions of innocent beings would die. He said that they had asked for monsters and they clearly expected to find none. Asked what the ambassador was suggesting. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he said that 50 years ago, when humanity joined the Confederation, they signed treaties promising to abandon warfare. They promised to give up their weapons and their armies and their fleets. They promised to become peaceful members of the galactic community. Amy Vance asked if Earth had actually kept those promises. Smiled, but there was no humor in it. He said that humanity had learned many things in its long and bloody history. They had learned how to fight. They had learned how to kill. They had learned how to wage war on scales that would horrify any other species in the galaxy. But they had also learned something else. They had learned that some things were worth lying about. He pulled out a small communication device and entered a code that only a handful of people in the entire galaxy knew. The message he sent was short, just 5 words. They want monsters, wake up. Somewhere far away, on a small blue planet that the galaxy considered young and unimportant, alarms began to sound in hidden places. Deep inside hollowed-out asteroids, lights flickered on in chambers that had been dark for decades. In underground bases beneath mountains and deserts, men and women who had trained their entire lives for a day they hoped would never come receive their orders. The Galactic Confederation had given up on warfare. They had decided that violence was primitive and unnecessary. They had beaten their swords into plowshares and trusted that the universe would reward their peaceful nature. Humanity had smiled and nodded and signed all the right treaties. And then they had kept their swords sharp and hidden, waiting for the day when the universe proved that monsters were still real. That day had finally come. Commander looked at Ambassador and asked what happened now. Put away his communication device and straightened his jacket. He said that now they would go back into that chamber and tell the Confederation to hold on. Help was coming. He said that they wanted to know if there were any monsters left in the galaxy. Earth was about to give them an answer they would never forget. The message from Ambassador reached Earth in less than 3 minutes. It traveled through a network of hidden relay stations that officially did not exist. It bypassed every Confederation monitoring system without leaving a trace. And when it arrived at the United Defense Council headquarters beneath the Swiss Alps, it triggered protocols that had been waiting for over 50 years. Secretary Daniel was eating breakfast with his daughter when his secure phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and the color drained from his face. He kissed his daughter on the forehead and told her that he had to go to work. She was used to this. Her father had always been busy with government business. She did not know that he commanded the largest hidden military force in galactic history. 30 minutes later stood in a chamber carved from solid granite 2 miles beneath the mountains. The room was filled with screens and control stations and officers in crisp uniforms. At the center of it all was a massive holographic display showing the known galaxy. Red markers indicated fleet positions. Blue markers showed Confederation worlds. And scattered throughout the map, hidden in asteroid fields and gas giant moons and the dark spaces between stars, green markers glowed with quiet menace. Admiral Grace Porter was already there when arrived. She was a tall woman with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much death to be surprised by anything. She had commanded Earth's combined fleet for 15 years, a fleet that the galaxy did not know existed. General stood beside her. He was built like a tank and spoke like a philosopher. His ground forces numbered 50 million trained soldiers spread across hidden bases on a dozen worlds. Every one of them had volunteered. Every one of them knew that they might spend their entire careers waiting for a war that never came, and every one of them was ready. Activated the main display and played the ultimatum for them. They watched in silence as Supreme Commander made his threats. When it was finished, asked for their assessment. Admiral Porter spoke first. She said that the fleet was large but not invincible. Their technology was advanced but not beyond what humanity could match. Their tactics relied on overwhelming force and the assumption that their enemies would be too afraid to fight back. They had clearly never encountered serious resistance. General agreed. He said that they were bullies. They had conquered weaker species for so long that they had forgotten what real opposition looked like. They expected the Confederation to surrender without a fight. They expected easy prey. Nodded slowly. He said that the question was whether Earth should reveal itself. For 50 years they had kept their military hidden. They had let the galaxy believe that humans were just another peaceful species. If they acted now, that secret would be gone forever. The Confederation would know that humanity had lied to them. Other species might fear Earth as much as they feared the... Admiral Porter shook her head. She said that the Confederation would be destroyed without help. Billions of innocent beings would die. And dozens of other species would be enslaved or exterminated. Earth had joined the Confederation to protect the peaceful and the weak. What good was their hidden strength if they refused to use it when it mattered most? General added something else. He said that humanity had made many mistakes in its history. They had fought wars against each other for thousands of years. They had caused suffering on scales that still haunted their collective memory. But they had also learned from those mistakes. They had learned that the strong had a duty to protect those who could not protect themselves. They had learned that some monsters could only be stopped by something even more dangerous. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached for the communication panel and opened a channel to every hidden base in the solar system and beyond. His voice was steady when he spoke. He said that this was not a drill. He said that the Galactic Confederation faced extinction at the hands of an enemy that believed the galaxy held no more monsters. He said that they were going to prove that enemy wrong. Across the solar system, blast doors opened in asteroids that looked dead and empty. Ships that had waited in darkness for 50 years powered up their engines and weapons. Crews that had trained for this moment every day of their adult lives took their stations. 2,000 warships of the Earth combined fleet emerged from hiding like wolves rising from a long sleep. Admiral Porter transmitted the fleet activation codes and watched her display fill with green lights as ship after ship reported ready for combat. She allowed herself a small smile. The thought they were the apex predators of the galaxy. They were about to learn otherwise. General began issuing orders for ground force mobilization. Transports would carry soldiers to defend every Confederation world that threatened. They would fight in alien jungles and frozen wastelands and the burned-out ruins of cities they had never seen before. They would fight for people they had never met, and they would win. Opened a channel to the command frequency. He knew they would be monitoring all Confederation communications. He wanted them to hear this. He said that this message was for Supreme Commander of the Dominion. He said that his demand for surrender had been received and considered. He said that the Galactic Confederation was under the protection of Earth. He said that any attack on Confederation worlds would be met with the full force of human military power. He paused and then added 5 final words. You asked for monsters coming. Somewhere across the galaxy, in the command chamber of the largest invasion fleet that had ever assembled, Supreme Commander received the transmission. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he laughed. One small species thought it could challenge the Dominion. One young civilization thought it could stop an empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds. He would enjoy teaching them how wrong they were. The system had 3 inhabited worlds and a population of 2 billion. They were a gentle species with soft blue fur and large eyes that saw beauty in everything. They had never built weapons. They had never fought wars. They had joined the Confederation 400 years ago and spent their time creating art and music and poetry that moved even the most stoic species to tears. They chose for their first attack because they wanted to send a message. They wanted the galaxy to see what happened to those who did not surrender. Captain Sam stood on the bridge of the battleship Fury of Texas and watched the tactical display with cold fury. The fleet had arrived at 6 hours ago. 300 warships had surrounded the peaceful worlds and begun orbital bombardment without warning. They had no defense forces. They had no weapons. All they could do was die. The distress signals from had been flooding Confederation channels for hours. Screams and pleas and prayers in a language that sounded like singing. Had ordered his communications officer to mute the audio. He could not afford to let his crew hear it. Not yet. Not until they could do something about it. Lieutenant Commander Bate Hardy stood at the tactical station running final calculations. She was a small woman with quick hands and a mind that could process combat data faster than most computers. She reported that the Earth fleet would exit jump space in 12 minutes. They would emerge directly behind the formation. The enemy would have no time to react. Nodded, he opened a channel to the 50 ships under his command. Task Force 7, the tip of the spear. He told them that they all knew what was happening they all knew what they were doing to innocent people. He told them that in 12 minutes they were going to stop it. He told them to make humanity proud. Pilot Nash sat in the cockpit of his fighter in the launch bay of the carrier Swift Vengeance. He was 26 years old and he had never seen real combat. None of them had. Earth had been at peace for 3 centuries, but every pilot in the fleet had trained for this moment since they were old enough to fly. They had run simulations against every possible enemy. They had pushed themselves until they could fly in their sleep, and now they would find out if all that training was enough. His squadron leader came over the comm channel. She told them that they would launch the moment they exited jump space. Their mission was to destroy enemy fighters and protect the capital ships. She told them to stay together and watch each other and remember that every they killed was one less monster hurting innocent people. Nash gripped his flight stick and waited. Around him 40 other pilots did the same. They were afraid. Anyone who said otherwise was lying, but they were also ready. They had been born for this. The countdown reached 0 and reality twisted around them as the fleet dropped out of jump space. One moment there was nothing but the strange gray void of faster-than-light travel. The next moment they were surrounded by stars and the burning worlds of and 300 warships that had absolutely no idea they were coming. Captain gave the order, all ships open fire. The fury of Texas unleashed its main batteries, and the darkness of space lit up with the fury of a dying sun. Plasma bolts and rail gun rounds and missile swarms tore into the formation. Ships that had been raining death on defenseless worlds suddenly found themselves on the receiving end of violence they had never imagined. They were not cowards. They had conquered 1,000 worlds and fought countless battles, but they had never fought humans. They had never faced an enemy that attacked with such speed and precision and absolute determination. They had never encountered a species that channeled all its rage into cold, efficient destruction. Nash launched with his squadron and dove straight into the chaos. Fighters scrambled to meet them, but they were too slow, too surprised. Nash lined up his first target and squeezed the trigger. The enemy fighter exploded in a ball of flame, and he was already moving to the next one before the debris could spread. His squadron leader was calling targets, and his wingman was covering his flank, and everything he had ever trained for was happening exactly as it should. He was terrified and exhilarated and focused all at the same time. He killed 3 more fighters in the first minute, then 4 more. Then he lost count. On the Fury of Texas, Lieutenant Commander Hardy reported that the formation was breaking. Their ships were scattering. They were trying to retreat. She asked if they should let them go. Captain shook his head. He said that those ships had been killing innocent people an hour ago. He said that they did not get to run away now. He ordered all ships to pursue and destroy. The battle lasted 2 more hours. When it was finally over, 243 warships had been destroyed. Another 30 had surrendered when they realized that death was the only alternative. The rest had fled into jump space with human ships chasing them. Earth had lost 11 ships and 412 lives. The first human casualties in a galactic war, ordered their names recorded and their families. They would be remembered as heroes. The first to fall in defense of a galaxy that did not yet understand what humanity was willing to sacrifice. Below them, the surviving emerged from their shelters and looked up at the sky. They saw the debris of the enemy fleet burning in their atmosphere like falling stars. They saw the dark shapes of human warships taking up protective positions around their wounded worlds. They did not understand what had happened. They did not know who had saved them, but they knew that something had answered their prayers. Word spread across the Confederation at the speed of light. Had been saved. The had been defeated, and a species called humanity had revealed itself as something the galaxy had never expected. Earth had teeth, And Earth was angry. 6 months into the war, and Sergeant Lisa Cole had forgotten what clean air smelled like. The planet was called 4, and it had been an agricultural world before they arrived. Now it was a burned wasteland of scorched fields and shattered cities, and the bodies of innocent farmers who had never held a weapon in their lives. Cole crouched behind a broken wall with her squad and watched the patrol move through the ruins of what had once been a hospital. The enemy soldiers were tall and covered in gray scales, and they moved with the casual confidence of predators who had never known fear. They were searching for survivors. Cole knew what they would do when they found them. She had 9 soldiers left. She had started with 15, but 6 months of constant fighting had taken its toll. Private Danny had died 3 weeks ago covering their retreat from a forward position. Corporal Maria Santos had been killed by a sniper 2 days later. The others had fallen one by one in battles that blurred together in her memory. She carried their dog tags in her pocket. She would deliver them personally when this war was over. If she survived that long. She signaled her squad to move. They flowed through the rubble like ghosts, years of training guiding every step. The patrol never saw them coming. Cole took down the first 2 herself with quick, precise shots. Her squad handled the rest. It was over in seconds. 8 enemy soldiers dead without a single human casualty. They pushed forward to the hospital. Most of it had collapsed, but the basement levels were still intact. Cole led her squad down the broken stairs and found what they were looking for. 400 huddled in the darkness. Patients and doctors and nurses who had refused to abandon the sick and wounded when the invasion began. They had been hiding here for 3 weeks, surviving on whatever food and water they could scavenge. An elderly with silver fur approached Cole. She was a doctor. Cole could tell from the symbols on her clothing. The doctor spoke in halting English. She asked if the humans had come to help them. She asked if there was any hope left. Cole looked at the frightened faces surrounding her, large eyes that reflected the dim light, small children clinging to their parents, wounded patients too weak to stand. These people had never done anything to deserve this suffering. They had simply been unlucky enough to live on a world that they wanted. She told the doctor that help had arrived. She told her that they were going to get everyone out of here. She told her that no one else was going to die today. 3 hours later, Cole watched the last transport lift off with the survivors aboard. Her squad had held the perimeter against 2 counterattacks while the evacuation proceeded. She had lost 2 more soldiers, Private Chris Ward and Specialist Jenny Blake. Good people who had died protecting strangers they had never met before today. On the other side of the planet, medic Tony Reeves worked without rest in a field hospital that never stopped receiving casualties. He had been awake for 36 hours, and his hands were steady even though his mind was exhausted. The patient in front of him was a child with 4 arms and skin like polished wood. She had been caught in an explosion, and her injuries were severe. He operated for 2 hours. Human medicine and biology did not always mix well, but Reeves had studied every species in the Confederation. He knew what he was doing. When he was finished, the child would live. She would need months of recovery, but she would live. Her mother was waiting outside the surgical tent. She had 3 eyes, and all of them were filled with tears. She grabbed Reeves with 2 of her arms and held him tight, and said something in her own language that the translator rendered as gratitude beyond words. Reeves hugged her back and told her that her daughter was going to be fine. He moved to the next patient, and the next after that. Human and alien alike, it did not matter to him what species they were. They were all people who needed help. That was enough. Commander Jake stood on the bridge of the Relentless and reviewed the latest casualty reports. His ship was no longer a diplomatic vessel. It had been refitted for combat 6 months ago and had led a battle group through 12 major engagements since then. They had liberated 6 occupied systems and saved millions of lives. They had also lost hundreds of good people along the way. A Confederation observer named had been assigned to his ship 3 months ago. She was with the same soft blue fur and gentle eyes as the people they had saved at. She had watched humans fight and die for her species, and she still did not understand why. She approached after he finished reading the reports. She asked him a question that had clearly been bothering her for a long time. She asked why humans were willing to die for aliens. She asked what Earth gained from sacrificing its children on foreign worlds. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he told her a story. He told her about a time long ago when humanity had been divided into thousands of nations that fought each other constantly. He told her about the wars and the suffering and the millions who had died for nothing more than lines on a map. He told her that humans had learned from all that pain. They had learned that the only thing worth fighting for was protecting those who could not protect themselves. Asked if humans were not afraid of dying. Said that they were terrified. Every soldier in his fleet was scared every single day, but fear did not stop them. Fear had never stopped humans from doing what was right. He looked out at the stars and said something that would remember for the rest of her life. Someone has to stand between the innocent and the monsters. That is what we are for. The home system was called Prime in honor of the Supreme Commander who had ruled the Dominion for 3 centuries. It was a fortress of 60 worlds and 1,000 space stations, and the largest military fleet ever assembled in that region of the galaxy. No enemy had ever reached it. No enemy had ever dared to try. Until now. Admiral Grace Porter stood on the bridge of her flagship, the carrier Earth's Fury, and watched her fleet emerge from jump space at the edge of the system. 2,000 human warships, 1,500 rebuilt Confederation vessels crewed by species that had learned to fight in the past year. The largest military force the galaxy had ever seen, united under a single purpose. End this war. They were waiting for them. Supreme Commander had pulled every ship from every conquered territory to defend his home. His fleet outnumbered the attackers 3-1. His weapons were powerful. His soldiers were fanatics who would die before surrendering. He was certain that this would be the day humanity learned to fear the Dominion. Admiral Porter reviewed her tactical display and issued her orders. Human ships would form the spearhead. Confederation vessels would provide support and cover the flanks. The objective was simple: break through the enemy lines and reach Prime. Force the Supreme Commander to surrender or destroy him completely. The 2 fleets closed on each other, and the largest battle in galactic history began. Captain Sam commanded the Fury of Texas at the center of the human formation. His ship had been repaired and refitted a dozen times over the past year. Half his original crew had been replaced by fresh recruits, but the spirit remained the same. They were here to finish what they had started. The first wave of enemy missiles reached them, and the point defense systems lit up the void with streams of fire. Ships died on both sides as the formations collided, watched the tactical display and called out targets and kept his crew focused on the mission. They had trained for this. They had bled for this. They would not fail now. Pilot Nash flew with his squadron through the chaos of the battle. He had become an ace 5 times over in the past year. He had lost count of his kills and stopped caring about the numbers long ago. All that mattered was protecting his wingmen and completing the mission. He dove through a gap in the enemy formation and destroyed a cruiser with a torpedo run that his instructors would have called impossible. The human fleet pushed forward through fire and death, and the desperate resistance of an enemy that was finally beginning to understand fear. Ship after ship fell on both sides, but the humans never stopped advancing. They had come too far and lost too many to turn back now. Supreme Commander watched from his command station on Prime as his fleet was torn apart. He had never seen anything like this. The humans fought like demons. They took damage that should have destroyed them and kept coming. They lost ships and squadrons and entire battle groups, and still they pushed forward. He opened a channel to the human flagship and demanded to know what they were. He demanded to know how a species so young could fight with such fury. He demanded to know why they would not simply die like every other enemy the Dominion had ever faced. Admiral Porter answered him. Her voice was calm and cold and absolutely certain. She told him that they were humanity. She told him that they had been fighting wars since before his species learned to walk upright. She told him that they had mastered the art of destruction and then chosen to use it only in defense of the innocent. She told him that he had made a terrible mistake when he threatened the beings under their protection. She told him that this was what happened when someone asked for monsters and Earth answered. The final assault began. Human ships broke through the last defensive line and descended on Prime itself. Ground forces led by General landed on the surface and fought their way toward the Central Command Complex. Sergeant Lisa Cole was among them, leading what remained of her squad through the streets of the enemy capital. The soldiers fought to the last. They had been told that surrender meant death. They had been told that humans were savages who would show no mercy. But when Cole's squad captured a group of enemy wounded, she ordered her medic to treat them. When they took prisoners, she made sure they were fed and sheltered. The soldiers did not understand. This was not how conquerors were supposed to behave. Supreme Commander stood alone in his command chamber as human soldiers breached the outer doors. He had a weapon in his hand. He could die fighting. It would be the proper end for a warrior of the Dominion. But then he saw the human officer who entered the room. It was Ambassador, the same man who had sent the first message to Earth a year ago, the same man who had started all of this. He was unarmed. He was not even wearing armor. He walked toward as if he had nothing to fear. Told that it was over. He told him that the Dominion fleet was destroyed. He told him that his empire had fallen. He offered him a choice: surrender and face justice for his crimes, or die here and let someone else make peace for his people. Asked why humans would offer mercy to someone who had tried to exterminate them. Said that mercy was not weakness. He said that humanity had learned that lesson through centuries of blood and suffering. He said that they did not fight to destroy their enemies. They fought to protect the innocent. And now that the innocent were safe, there was no more need for killing. Dropped his weapon and surrendered. 3 months later, Sergeant Lisa Cole stood on a balcony overlooking a rebuilt city on 4. They had returned to their world and begun the long process of healing. Children played in the streets below her. Their laughter echoed off buildings that had been ruins a year ago. A young girl ran up to her and offered her a flower. It was small and blue, and it smelled like honey. The girl said something in her own language that the translator rendered as "thank you for saving us." Cole knelt down and accepted the flower. She thought about everyone she had lost: Danny, Maria Santos, Chris Ward, Jenny Blake, all the others whose names she carried with her every day. They had died so that this moment could exist. They had died so that children could laugh and play without fear. She told the girl that she was welcome. She told her to grow up strong and happy. She told her that there were people who would always protect her. The girl ran off to join her friends, and Cole watched her go. Somewhere far away, the galaxy was rebuilding. The Confederation was stronger than ever. Humanity had revealed itself as the monsters that protected the innocent. And Earth stood ready to answer whenever the call came again.